You're listening to Grown and Growing with Sonia Hamlin. Hello. Welcome back, and thanks for listening to another episode. Today is a solo episode, and it's been a minute since I've done an episode all by myself. But this topic has been on my mind for a while, so I feel like this is the perfect opportunity to discuss it. I think of a lot of topics all the time. I'm jotting down ideas of things that I can talk about, but they don't all stick with me, right? It's just these one topics that I get little nudges and little signs everywhere that this is what I should be talking about. So I'm going to take that as a sign from God and listen to my gut. And today we are talking all about friendship. I always knew I wanted to do a topic about friendship on the podcast. It was one of the first topic areas I wrote down before I even started a podcast. But I didn't plan for it until I kept reading these articles about the prevalence of loneliness in America. Specifically, I read an article in the New York Times that said 61% of adults admit to being lonely. That's freaking 1 out of every 2 Americans who say they feel loneliness on a regular basis. And I also learned in a different article that friendship networks have been shrinking with each decade, meaning that people have fewer and fewer friends in their friendship circle as time goes on. This actually reminded me about an article in Psychology Today that came out a few months back that has social media in a tizzy. It said that there is an increase of single, lonely, heterosexual men in the United States. Now, this article was really about dating. It really focused on the fact that women are choosing to not get married and and would prefer to be single well into their older years. I also connected this little fact with another article I read that said that men have a harder time making and keeping connections as they get older. Loneliness is such an issue in the United States that the Surgeon General called it a public health threat similar to obesity and smoking. So I read these articles in the New York Times and NPR, but there are so many more resources about loneliness in America out there. So it is well documented, apparently. And one would think that the pandemic is the cause of all of this loneliness that everyone is feeling. But the numbers show that Americans were lonely well before the pandemic, and COVID-19 just made it a little worse. If you had to guess what is driving this quote unquote public health threat, what would you say? If you guess social media, you're partially correct. It's basically driven by 2 things. The first thing is our increasing reliance on digital technology. And this includes social media. But I was surprised to find out that it's not just social media, right? People go online, they can make fake personas, they can fake, how they feel about life, how they feel about themselves. They can just completely be somebody else on social media. But it's even bigger than that. It's also the video games that we play. It's also Uber, DoorDash, all of these apps aimed at making our lives easier. And if you think about it, it could have an effect on, how isolated we're feeling. Think about it. Before, you would need a friend to pick you up from the airport, or you would carpool to a place. Now you could just call an Uber out of pure convenience. Now you can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner delivered to you without even leaving your house. With all of the technology, and this technology, which is designed to make our lives easier, which I definitely appreciate, it's also made us more isolated. And I don't even want to talk about how AI will affect things. I think that it will definitely have us living in Terminator 2, where the machines take over. Look, AI is not only coming for our jobs, it's coming for our livelihood. And I am afraid to see where it's going to take us. I hope that I'm wrong. I really do. But something tells me that I'm not. The second reason the country is so lonely is because we are deeply divided. I wanted to say we are becoming deeply divided, but I think we're already here. We are already here at deeply divided. There are families who can't have dinner with each other because they're on opposite sides of the political spectrum. So that makes dinner very uncomfortable for them. There's no conversation. You're right, you're wrong, and there's no room for people in the middle. And then you add to that the rise in gun violence, including mass shootings. And, there's this feeling that you can be shot anywhere you go. You're not safe at school, at church, at home, in the grocery store, in the movies. You can't even knock on your neighbor's door or knock on the wrong door. You can't even piss your neighbor off without worrying about being shot. It's crazy. And so when you think about, digital technology making our lives easier, and you think about how deeply divided, self-centered, and violent our country is, there is really a loss of human connection. Humans are made for human connection. We need human connection. It's just not a nice to have. When you consider the state of the world, you really realize, or at least I have, that friendships aren't just a nice to have. They are necessary. And that's really why I want to put the spotlight on this very important relationship. As a society, we place a lot of emphasis on romantic relationships as if they are the end all be all. And they are important. They do, have an impact on the trajectory of your life. But I'm also here to make the case that friendships are just as, if not more important than your romantic relationships. So I couldn't hop on a podcast and talk about friendship without asking myself, what type of friend am I? First, let me say, I'm not the type of person with a lot of friends. Growing up, because it always goes back to your childhood, doesn't it? I was shy, I was quiet, I felt awkward, so I kept to myself a lot. I was a big reader during my middle school years, read a lot, kept to myself a lot. And I had friends, of course, but I wasn't one of the cool kids. I was perfectly fine in one-on-one or smaller groups, but bigger groups made me feel anxious. I suppose, actually, I know that some of that carried over into adulthood because I feel the exact same way. I hate networking events. I hate big events where I'm forced to quote unquote network and make small talk with people. It really just makes me nervous. And my husband and I are very different in that way. He's super outgoing, loves people, the biggest extrovert that you'd ever meet. I mean, he does comedy and he's also a lawyer. So, he loves the spotlight. And I'm more of an introvert. I mean, I know I'm doing a podcast, but it's generally my MO to kind of be in the background. It's interesting because when we were planning our wedding and considering the bridal party, Derek was like, hey, I could either have 3 or 15 groomsmen. Those were his options. It was 3 or 15 and nothing in between. And I'm like, yo, that's crazy because who can't choose, 6 or 7 or 5? Who can't choose that many friends? But to him, he felt like he has so many friends that he either had to include the very limited number or he had to include everybody. I mean, I was peeved, but I can see his point, right? Over the years, he's accumulated a lot of friends. If you think about elementary, middle, high school, you think about grad school. You think about college, grad school, law school. He's in a fraternity. He has a career in Baltimore that requires him to know a lot of people. He also has hobbies. He does, comedy. So that's a lot of networks. So I told you, he has a lot of networks. We can go out of town. It doesn't matter where we are. We can go out of the country and I guarantee he will know at least one person in that country. It's just that he's a people person. Needless to say, I am the complete opposite of that. We ended up having 3 bridesmaids and 3 groomsmen in our wedding because I just thought it was ridiculous to have a 30-person bridal party for a destination wedding. Also, I didn't have 15 people to put as my bridesmaids anyway, so that wasn't happening. That experience really highlighted the fact that Derek and I had very different definitions of the word friendship. Like Derek, I would say, has a looser definition of friends. Everybody is his friend. And I usually question him on that. I'm like, is everybody your friend? How can everybody be your friend? And me, on the flip side, I like to keep my circle tight and small. I don't use the word friend very lightly. If I'm using it on you, that means you kind of hold a special place in my life. So now that you know about me, how would I rank myself as a friend? What do I think my best attributes are as a friend? I like to think of the saying, to have great friends, you have to be a great friend. And I really try to be a great friend to all of my friends. The first thing I would say about myself is that I'm loyal. If I call you my friend, we're going to be friends for the long haul. We may not talk every day. We may not talk every week. And at this age, it's probably likely that we don't talk, in a month. But when we do, we pick up right where we left off. It's like no time has passed at all. It actually makes our conversations and our meetups that much more exciting because there's been some distance between us. And so we have a lot to catch up on. The second thing I'm going to say about myself is that I am reliable. I'm going to do my very best to be there for you in your good times, to help celebrate you, in your bad times, to listen to you, in those in-between times, to, just check in with you. I feel like my friends can rely on me to be there, to pick up the phone, or to be there in person if necessary. The next thing I would say about me is that I'm a good listener and I give sound advice. Look, if you come to me with a problem, I am going to listen without judgment. And if you want, and sometimes even if you don't want, I'm going to give you some good ass advice. I am not the friend that tells you what you want to hear. I'm just not. I can't do it. I tell you the truth as I see it with kindness, in the best way I know how. But I'm also not going to judge you for making your own decision, for doing exactly what you want to do, even if it's the opposite of what, I said you should do. Who am I? It's your life. I know my way isn't the best way or the only way, and I respect that in my friends. The next thing I'll say is that I am a trustworthy person. I think that my friends can rely on me with the light things, the heavy things, and everything in between. I feel like I am a person of honor, and I really do try to do what I say I'm going to do. I try to be a woman of my word. I'm not a people pleaser, and I'm definitely not going to do things to my detriment, but I really try to show up for my friends in a real and genuine way. I want to be somebody that they can rely on. The last thing I'll say about myself as a friend is that I can hype you up. There is no better feeling to me than supporting my friends in their business ventures. I hold them accountable. I'm here to hype you up. I'm here to see you when you can't see yourself. I'm here to make you laugh, give you a hug, take you out, whatever you need. I'm your hype girl. I'm that friend that's always going to be in your corner cheering you on. Overall, I see my friends for who they are, right? I appreciate their quirks. They're all very different, right? Depending on where I met them and where they are in their life. And I'm not looking to change them. I'm not looking to have them be something else for me, but I want them to encourage them and challenge them to be the best versions of themselves, whatever that is. And those are the same qualities I would want in my friends. Next, sorry, Drake and DJ Khaled, I'm going to make the case for getting new friends. I am not the type of person who believes you should continue to be a friend just because you've been a friend to them for a very long time. I don't feel like history should dictate a friendship. I feel like, you should consider it. Maybe if you've been a friend for a long time, maybe you don't want to cut them off with the quickness. Maybe you want to think about it, have a few conversations. If the best thing you can say about your friendship is that you've been friends for a very long time, or all of your best memories, your best times, your most trusted, intimate moments are in the distant past, then maybe it's time to reevaluate your friendships. Maybe you found that you have outgrown your friends. It happens. It happens every day. I jotted down a few ways for you to know that you may have outgrown your friendship. The first thing I put is you notice that you don't have much in common anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that you and your friends have to have the exact same interest in order to be friends. Not true at all. But if the thing that your friendship is based on, the foundational thing that you guys agree on and you used to bond over has changed and you no longer see eye to eye on that thing, then, maybe it's time to assess your friendship. People grow, people change, people develop different interests. And sometimes that means your friends don't quite fit with the person that you've become. And that's okay. The second reason I have here is you don't like yourself when you're around them. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you make bad decisions or you feel badly about yourself when you're around this person or this group of people. Or you feel like you are reverting back to an old version of yourself that you thought you had outgrown. If your circle of friends is taking you there or making you be a person that you don't want to be, it's time to look at those friendships. The next thing I wrote down is you don't look forward to hanging out with this person. Look, they zap your energy. When they call you, like, if you're taking a deep breath and exhale before you pick up the phone, or maybe you're doing some breathing exercises before you pick up the phone, that might be a sign. It could be a season, right? Your friend could be in a season where they're going through some things and, it's going on and maybe you're tired of hearing about it. But if that's the majority of your time, if that happens the majority of the time you spend with this person, to me, that's a red flag. You can't hang out with people who zap all of your energy. And then the last thing I wrote down is the friendship is one-sided. If you have a friend and you're there for them and you listen to them and you hear all of their problems and you hear all of their concerns and their wants and they're there for you're there for their celebrations, but they don't reciprocate. They're not there for you. They don't listen to you. They don't ask about your life. They don't ask about your day. They don't celebrate you in the way that you would celebrate them. That's a one-sided friendship. And I would evaluate that friendship for sure. So those are just a few good reasons I would think you would need to either let a friend go or recategorize that friend in your little circle. I'm not a big proponent of just cutting people off willy-nilly. I really am not. I feel like friendship is like any relationship. They have their ups and downs, and you have to work through them. There is a point where you have to be honest. There is a point where there's a little give and take. There's some compromise. It's just like any other relationship that you have, and it's not without effort. I actually watched an Oprah and Michelle Obama interview on Netflix called The Light That We Carry. It was a great interview. You should check it out. And Flotus talked about how when she moved into the White House, she had to change her friend circle. And what that meant was she had to cut some people off. She had to recategorize people as friends. And she also had to find new friends that kind of fit the position or the place where she was in her life at the time. And she did that in a couple of ways. For some people, she just slowly let the friendship die. She stopped inviting them to stuff. She stopped calling them as much, or maybe they stopped calling each other as much. I'm sure there's some people somewhere thinking Michelle Obama was acting funny because she in the White House now. She don't have time for them, which she didn't deny. She was like, that's true. I don't have time for your shenanigans in the White House because the stakes are so high. I mean, I get it. I mean, I don't get it because I'm not in the White House, but I get what she means. In other friendships, she had to have conversations with these people, which I think is really brave. I mean, I would just choose to let the friendship die because, it's just if we're both feeling, because if the friendship just dies, naturally, so to speak, then that means there's some feelings on both sides that maybe this is not working. I'm sure the mature thing is to have a conversation with people to make sure that, they understand why your friendship is ending. And you can do that with kindness and honesty. And you can hope for, all the understanding that they can muster in the time. I feel like that's very brave to be able to have a conversation with somebody about why the friendship has to end. Unless there is an incident that prompts the ending of a friendship, like an incident that you can point to say, you know what, this thing you did here, this is why we can't be friends. I feel like that makes it a conversation easier. Now, I'm probably going to step on some toes here while we're talking about, friends entering and leaving, kind of leaving your life. I do have a problem with people who cut off their friends for relationships, for romantic relationships. Maybe that doesn't happen so much in our 40s. I hope not. I hope that people can balance having a relationship and friendships with people and not have that be a conflict. But the other thing that I see are women cutting off friendships because they're a wife and a mom. And those things are the utmost importance, which I agree. I don't disagree that your family, your husband, your kids shouldn't be at the top of the list all the time. But I also feel like you should be able to carve out time for yourself. And that includes carving out time to have great friendships with people. I feel like that's important. And I do not think that your husband or your kids, for that matter, should be your all and your everything. I've always felt like that. I've always felt that way. Even when my kids were babies, I felt like that. I always wanted to make sure I made time for myself. I made time to get out. And it could be very hard, especially when your kids are reaching that adolescent stage where they have more activities than you do, to prioritize yourself in that way. But I feel like it's necessary. At some point, your kids are going to grow up, have their own lives, and maybe they're not going to be thinking about you that much. Maybe they're not going to be calling you as much. What are you going to do? And likewise, your kids are going to leave and you're going to be with your husband. But at the same time, it is healthy that you have relationships outside of your husband. And he should want that for you too. You need and you deserve that time. So we talked about cutting people off, but I said I was making the case for bringing new friends into your life. So here's what I'm thinking. In the articles I read about loneliness, one of the things that we talk about is when you get to middle age or when you get to be older, it gets harder to make friends. And there is this notion that making friends should happen naturally. It should be organic and it should come easily to people. And that's a fallacy. That's false. I mean, I do remember a time in my life where I wanted to make new friends. And it was hard because people either already had their friendship circles or, you felt like you didn't quite fit. Where do you go? It definitely requires that you be intentional about making friends. You kind of have to put yourself out there. So if you're one of those people who beat yourself up because you feel like you're not good at making friends or it hasn't worked out for you, please know that it's not you. It's just harder to make friends. It's difficult, period. And like anything you want in life, you must take initiative and be intentional about making friends. It requires effort. It really does. You have to get out of your comfort zone. And I was once reading a book called Platonic, How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends by Dr. Marissa Franco. And here are a couple of things that she mentioned in her book you can try when you're attempting to make new friends, when you're putting yourself out there to get some new connections. Number 1, try new activities. This may seem obvious, right? You need to go to events. You need to be around people if you're going to meet new people. True, right? But there are very specific events that you should go to in order to maximize or increase the opportunity for you to engage with someone so that you can make a connection. So instead of going to like a concert, by yourself, maybe you try a book club, or maybe you try an art class, or maybe you try a dance class, something that requires you to come back over and over again. That increases the chances that you'll be able to meet someone, have a conversation. You'll have several opportunities to come back and engage with the person and develop a relationship slowly. The next tip is to engage acquaintances. If there are people in your orbit that you'd like to get to know better, reach out to them, ask them for a cup of coffee, or invite them out to lunch. You've already established some type of relationship with them, some type of connection, and that should take some of the pressure off. The third thing she suggests is to assume that people will like you. That's a big one. Assume that people will like you. It always comes back to mindset. So much of the fear that we have is in our head. It keeps us from accomplishing the biggest and the smallest things. Your behavior often follows your mindset. So if you get your mind right, your behavior will often follow. These last two tips are not in the book Platonic, but I added them because I think that they'll also help you in establishing friendships. The next one is say yes more. This tip is actually from the autobiography that Shonda Rhimes wrote called Year of Yes. It's about how her life changed when she started to say yes more to opportunities that she instinctively and regularly said no before. And that not only changed her year, it changed her life. It's a really, really good book. And if you're looking to make friends and get out there, saying yes more is a really good start. The last tip is really very simple. Be patient. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with the process. Your friendship may not develop overnight, but don't give up. Keep trying. Don't become a stalker, right? You got to know how to read the signs and read the clues, but be patient and watch your friendship as it develops. It may be for the best that a friendship takes a while to develop. It may be stronger that way. Don't rush it. I wanted to talk about friendship today because I think it's so important. One of the reasons the Surgeon General wanted to make loneliness a public health risk is because not only did it make depression, anxiety, and mental kind of disorders more prevalent, it also affects your physical health. There are studies that say old people die from loneliness. People get sicker because they're lonely. People get sicker because they lack connection with other humans. They lack connection with family. There is some, early research that found links between, how active you are and how engaged you are with dementia and things like stroke and heart disease. So it is not only good for you mentally and spiritually, it's also great for your physical health. So if you haven't, taken the time to reach out to your friends, or maybe there's a friendship you let lapse and you've been meaning to re-engage, but you haven't thought of the right words, or maybe you haven't had the time or thought you haven't had the time to do it. I'm encouraging you to go ahead and make those connections. Your, well-being really depends on it. And honestly, if we're ever going to improve as a nation, as a country, human connection, community, friendship is key to solving the issues that we have today. Now, look, where we sit right now, it doesn't seem I don't feel very positive right now. but I know change happens one person at a time. And so I'm hoping that, this little bit that I can do to put some positivity out in the world can spark something so that we can, start to step back from the precipice that we find ourselves on. I feel like we're on a cliff and we just gonna fall over. So take a moment to maybe reconnect with an old friend that you haven't spoken to in a while, or take a moment to assess the type of friend that you've been lately. Are you doing your best? Can you do a little better? Is there a friend that needs you right now? Go ahead and reach out. The Golden Girls wasn't just a great television show. It's goals. It's aspirations. That's what I'm trying to get to in my future. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.